As it does every year around this time, Spirent Communications has released its annual 5G Outlook Report. And Steve Douglas of Spirent is here today to talk about trends, geographical differences, and future areas of potential from across the 5G ecosystem. Welcome back, Steve.
It's good to be here, dude.
Great. Good to have you. So, to start us off, can you just give us the 30,000 foot overview of the 2024 report? What are the main trends that you're seeing in the 5G industry, the things that are really driving it today?
Yeah, absolutely, David. As you said, I mean, this is our annual report. It's actually our fifth annual report, and this year it's based on over 500 engagements we had during 23. And obviously, being a test company, we get a unique insight into what's sort of coming next. And there's really two big mega trends I think we're going to expect to see in 24. The first is really around the move to 5G standalone. Now, we did see sort of slow commercial deployment momentum during 2023 due to a mixture of factors, both the complexity that a new cloud native environment was bringing into many of the service providers, and also some of the macroeconomic uncertainty that was going on, which was slowing down some of the spending. But behind the scenes, we were engaged with over 30 service providers globally as they were actually testing the new 5G core network. And I think that's a really strong indicator for the commercial acceleration of deployments that we expect to see during 24. And I think what was most interesting about it, it wasn't just testing the core network itself.
Mhm.
It was also testing some of the enhanced services and the 5G devices to make sure that these new services like voice over new video, new radio, immersive video with network slicing would be commercially available this year. So really look out for that in 24. Those commercial deployments and move to 5G standalone increasing. I think the second area, mega area, was really around the private network ecosystem. We certainly saw some really positive momentum during 23 around private networks, really around the return of investment and how a small scale automated 5G environment with a few select use cases could actually deliver for enterprises very rapid value. And we saw a return of investments from some customers as fast as 6 months. And I think that's a good trend because up until this point, I think one of the concerns with private 5G has been that it's going to be a very complex, large, bespoke implementation. And I think last year we started to see this realization that having a small, lightweight 5G network in a box with a few servers, hosting a lightweight core network, a few small cell sites, and an edge application, combining that with automation, you could have a really low cost offering. And then coupling that with two or three select use cases, you could get that benefit. So we expect to see more of that this year, David. And I think we anticipate that that's a really good focus area towards the medium-sized businesses and possibly the smaller-sized businesses, which is a large part of the market, who don't necessarily require that very costly or bespoke type of implementation.
Okay. And just to follow on to at least to the first part of what you talked about, Steve, the core deployments. That would seem, and I know this isn't your area specifically or on the test side, but it would seem to portend an uptick in infrastructure equipment going onto the market.
Yes, to some degree. I think what you tend, well, there's two sides to that, David. I think what we saw was in the more mature markets, we certainly saw a gradual sort of plateauing of the radio infrastructure. I think a lot of the mature markets, the macro level coverage rollouts were sort of gradually coming towards an end. And we anticipate that to sort of slow down, where you'll start to see more targeted densification with small cells, probably from this point on.
Mhm.
The real move was more around, as I said, in the core of the network, bringing in the new 5G core, which is really a cloud native environment. So this is a different paradigm for many of the operators to deal with. It's not this traditional infrastructure. It's now trying to deal with sort of cloud native principles, and that I think was triggering sort of a lot of focus on digital transformation programs, David, as well. So in terms of if we're going to, bring in a cloud native environment to host the core network functions, do we have the relevant operational processes to manage the life cycle of that? How are we going to deal with, rapid software releases from the vendors? And really moving from a software engineer, or sorry, I would say a network engineering mindset to a software
Mhm.
engineering mindset. So we started to see quite a lot of investment last year towards these concepts of DevOps, principles like continuous integration and delivery. And we anticipate that to continue to grow this year as well.
Okay, very good. Now, turning to the emerging trends, what does the report tell us about things that are coming out with potential for high growth in the future?
Yeah, there's interesting. There's a few key areas here. I mean, one hot item, which we're really anticipating for the second half of the decade, is around non-terrestrial networks or satellites, these new low Earth orbit satellites. So
Mhm.
what we started seeing last year, and we're already seeing more momentum this year, is really the early stages of testing direct to device 5G communications. I would say at this stage, it's very much trying to understand the art of the possible in terms of what performance can be delivered, what types of services could be confidently provided. I think that's going to take a few years, both from the testing perspective, but also from the regulatory perspective, in terms of getting alignment, in terms of the spectrum to be used, managing interference. But we do anticipate that you will start to see initial services such as IoT and short messaging services direct to our handsets probably in 2025. And
Mhm.
then we expect to see the real value services such as voice and data, mobile broadband sort of from 2026 onwards. And I think that's going to really sort of start transforming some of the revenue potential. I think the other area is around augmented reality and virtual reality. David, again, we highlighted in the report, we saw certainly an increase in interest in testing, both from a consumer perspective, but also very much from an enterprise perspective of how they could use things like augmented reality within a private environment to implement things like monitoring, better monitoring of assets, remote support. So a field engineer could have an expert remotely supporting them. And again, a lot of the focus there in the testing was around making sure that the quality of experience that the users were having wearing these headsets, the imagery was good enough. The network was able to provide the relevant performance and guarantees around that. So we do anticipate to see a lot more of that this year and coming out sort of probably in the 25 and beyond. And again, we think there's a good sort of revenue potential around that from many of the customers we're engaging with.
Okay, very good. I and an area of interest for me is open and virtual RANs.
Mm.
How about that side of the equation?
Yes, that was a real interesting area last year. Obviously, the market is very much in its infancy from commercial deployments,
Mhm.
but behind the scenes, there's obviously a lot of activity going on in terms of the testing of it. I think what's really positive about it is that we now have over 30 service providers globally who are targeting meaningful deployments of Open RAN in the second half of this decade. You saw the major announcements recently there with AT&T and Vodafone.
Mhm.
And the ecosystem is growing rapidly. There's over 50 now suppliers of radio heads or the new central or distributed units that make up that disaggregated Open RAN environment. And what was the real sea change that we started to see, and it's going to continue through 24, is the evolution of the testing to move towards pilots and trials to the types of performance, high level interoperability, resilience testing, security testing,
Mhm.
which is going to be required to move those pilots and trials to large scale commercial deployments. And we're already seeing that they're starting to kick in now with the demand for that level of testing. And I think that's a really positive sign because those are the scenarios that are usually tested as you're starting to move to thinking towards, as I said, um, beyond just a small pilot and you're really thinking of a large scale commercial deployment. So again, I think we anticipate you'll see sort of, quite a considerable uptick in Open RAN deployments probably from from 2025 onwards.
Okay. With the, and what I'm curious to hear you talk about too is from your perspective as a provider of test methodologies and equipment, this disaggregation that Open RAN brings, the
Mm.
mixing and matching, does that present any particular challenges for you?
It presents more opportunities. um, It's an interesting area because obviously this is the first time in the industry. You're trying to mix and match the radio with the radio stack separated.
Yep.
There's a lot of challenges in terms of getting the performance from the vendors, in terms of obviously latency overheads. If some of the radio stack functions are geographically distributed, do they perform correctly? Have they adhered to the relevant standards correctly?
Mhm.
Do they scale correctly? Do they deal with disaster recovery correctly? So it starts adding lots more, I would say, iterations in terms of the types of testing that has to be done, and that's changing sort of a lot of mindsets in the way that testing has to be performed of it. So it usually triggers the mindset that actually we need to bring more automation into the life cycle management of the testing, so we can run all of these combinations of or iterations of the variants that need to be looked at. And you can do that continuously, because I think the other thing we're discovering is that, and we saw this with the 5G core as well, because a large part of this is now software. The cadence of updates and software releases coming from the suppliers is a lot faster than historically seen. In the past, where maybe you had a release every 6 months. Now you're seeing sort of software drops, not only monthly but even down to weekly, and that
Mhm.
means that it just requires a higher level or capability to continuously revalidate that.
Yep. Okay. Very good. Well, I think we've more or less covered the subject. Thank you very much, Steve, for taking the time to bring us up to date on what Spirent is seeing in the market, and we'll look forward to see how well your crystal ball works.